Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Better Than Food Film Reviews. I'm your host, Cliff Sargent. Great to see you as always. Hope you're doing well. So let's start this up again with my favorite film of all time, Dead Man by Jim Jarmusch. This will be a two-part review suggested by a friend of mine. The first part will be where I tell you what I love about the film and what I remember about it. And then the second part will be my thoughts and interpretations, just my ideas on what changed for me or what stayed the same, what's still strong or what's different, Because I can't remember the last time I've seen Dead Man. It's been a long, long time, but I'm very excited to rewatch it. But I still tell people it's my favorite film. So it will be interesting for me as well to see what's changed over the years. We experience works of art differently as we get older, and some things hold up, some things don't. So I'm a little worried, but I think I'm always going to love the film. It really hit me hard at a young age, and I'll talk more about that. It was directed by Jim Jarmusch, an American director based in New York who also did Stranger Than Paradise, Down by Law, Night on Earth, Coffee and Cigarettes, Only Lovers Left Alive, shot here in Detroit, and a film that many people disliked, but one of my favorite films of all time, another one by him, called The Limits of Control, which I thought was stunning visually, and the soundtrack on that was gorgeous. We're going to talk about the soundtrack on this one too, but excellent use of drone metal, and a great film, very unique, but some people didn't like that one. Broken Flowers with Bill Murray, oh yeah. Jarmusch has done a lot of great stuff. All the films mentioned are certainly worth your time. Dead Man is a black and white gothic western, sort of in the Cormac McCarthy variety. I've also read a piece that called it an anti-western. It was shot by the master of black and white cinematography, Robbie Mueller, who unfortunately passed away this year. And of course, it's essential to mention the cold, intense, expansive improv score done by Neil Young, just with a guitar, just him and his guitar. It's absolutely incredible, magnificent, one of the greatest soundtracks ever written, one of the greatest pieces of music ever written for me. So it goes like this. A man named William Blake, like the poet, played by Johnny Depp in one of his finest performances ever, travels all the way from Cleveland out to the middle of nowhere to this frontier town called Machine for a job that he's told he received a letter that says he has this job. He doesn't have a job. It's the end of the line, as he's warned by Crispin Glover, who plays this boiler man on the train covered in soot, totally black from head to toe. And he comes out and starts speaking to him in the first scene of the film, almost as a prophet, and he sets the ominous tone for the rest of the film with his offbeat delivery, which is quintessential Crispin Glover. He starts speaking to him almost as if he's like reciting poetry or something, and the only other passengers around them are these hunters. They're dressed in skins, right? And then they start shooting buffalo out of the side of the train. They're shooting buffalo! And this is the world that Johnny Depp, William Blake, is entering into. And he's a soft guy, he's wearing a suit, a suit and a top hat, and he's getting all these looks from everyone because he's a city boy, coming out into the middle of nowhere, into a rough place. So Blake arrives in this town, which is one of the bleakest locations imaginable. I think he walks through the town, he sees like a horse pissing, which adds this really gritty kind of realism to the whole thing. And then he sees this guy getting a blowjob, and then when he looks for more than a second, the guy looks back at him and he points a gun at him. And I mean, they're like, people are selling skulls. I mean, it is intense. It is dark stuff. So Blake doesn't get his job. The position was filled, and he spent everything he had to get there after his parents died. So this is a bad situation for William Blake. Broke and drunk, he goes home with a prostitute named Thel, whose ex, Charlie, catches them in bed together. He shoots her, but right before he does, she jumps in front of Blake, and the bullet goes through her into his chest, and then he pulls out her gun from underneath the pillow and he shoots her ex-lover in the neck and kills him. He kills her ex, but Blake's fate is sealed. He falls out of the window, steals this guy's horse, the guy who he just killed, and takes off into the night, wherever. It is one of the loneliest scenes when he climbs out of the window of her room, falls off the roof, down into the mud, and looks up at the night sky with all the stars, and he sees this shooting star. And it is It gives me goosebumps. Look at that. Look at that going. Never was there a scene for me that communicated more clearly, you are profoundly alone, if I'm remembering correctly. I'm interested to see if that holds up. So he wakes up to this Native American named Nobody trying to carve the bullet out of his chest with a knife. Nobody speaks English, having been captured when he was younger and raised by white men in their culture. And he mistakenly thinks that Johnny Depp is the actual poet William Blake, whom he loves. So now he discovers his favorite poet is an outlaw, a killer of white men, as he puts it. Thus begins the metamorphosis of William Blake and his journey to death, led by Nobody. Meanwhile, they're hunted by the phenomenal Lance Henriksen, who plays this vicious bounty hunter, hired by Robert Mitchum, who plays the father of Thel's ex, Charlie, who Blake killed. On top of this, you have cameos by Iggy Pop, Billy Bob Thornton, Alfred Molina, and John Hurt. Does it get better? I saw it when I was around 12 or 13, and it changed my life. Changed my whole thing. So that was approximately 16 years ago, but I've seen it since. But probably not for 4 or 5 years. It's definitely been a while, maybe more, all the way through. I'm sure I've watched clips, but sat down and watched all of Dead Man, I don't know how long it's been. I don't know. It's been that long. Been long enough for me to forget. So it'll be interesting to revisit this. I'm really excited, actually. When I saw it for the first time, I was living in Oregon, and that's where I grew up, and it was partially shot there. It was like this added layer of depth. It felt that much more real because I was, you know, my mom was working in this really, really, really small town out in the sticks. I mean, the middle of nowhere, and in Oregon. And so it was the terrain that I was traveling through every day with her to work, to hang out in this post office, was the same that I was looking at in the film. And you get out there far enough, you know, it's not too dissimilar from what you're seeing in the film. You know, it's very, very rural, lots of, you know, little houses with smoke coming out of them and just trees everywhere, endless seas of trees and this grim overcast and the rain and all of it. And it's just, and then the ocean, you know, it's all the mountains. I kind of miss the Northwest. But that was, it hit that much harder because I knew it, you know. It made me realize what could be done with cinema. It made me realize the power of film. It made me realize that sometimes films, the really good ones, can feel more real than real life. So now I'll go watch it and we'll see what's changed for me. Feel free to watch it as well, and I'll see you in part 2. Now, how did that go? Let's see if I can still play it. It was amazing. It is still absolutely my favorite film. Looking back on this, it's clearly a memento mori, a very potent reminder of the fleeting nature of existence, of the end of life that we will all face. A film that expresses at the same time the feeling that life is cold and violent and heartless, but also beautiful and humorous and meaningful. It's so unique. It is one of a kind. There is no other film like it. There is nothing I've seen that even begins to hit as hard. I mean, it sounds like I'm really embellishing it, but it's true for me. Maybe it's just a personal connection. You know, there's nowhere else that really, I mean, all the elements are just working together perfectly. Like the narrative, you know, the Native American culture, the black and white, you know, the journey towards death, Neil Young's soundtrack, the setting, which is Nevada and Arizona and the Pacific Northwest. All the scenes are just as strong, just as humorous, just as violent as I remember. Also, somebody I didn't mention who was in here is Gabriel Byrne. He plays Charlie, who's Thel's ex, who comes in and shoots her, and Johnny Depp. It's a very, very short scene, but he nailed it. And I'm going to bring it up again, but Robbie Mueller's cinematography is really, truly excellent. You know, the scene where, I remember, I think we analyzed this specific scene in film school where he's speaking to Thel in her room and they're looking at the paper roses. You know, the focus is so thin there that like most of their faces are out of focus, and it creates it, and it's like an extreme close-up too, cutting back from one face to the other, you know, as they're speaking to one another. It is such an intimate atmosphere that is created with that. I just thought that technique was really interesting, kind of bold, So I thought that Jarmusch is doing a lot of really, really, really experimental stuff in here. And I thought he's just like pulling out everything that he thinks could work, and it all does. And it's really a departure from his earlier films because I was reading an interview somewhere. It was discussing, how he was, Stranger Than Paradise and Down by Law and all these films, Night on Earth. They have much more comedy in them. There's a little bit of darkness in there, but Dead Man is, like I said, it's a memento mori. It really, truly is a dark, 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 dark film. But all that humorous improv style he cultivated with his earlier films just makes this one feel that much more intense. It makes the violence and darkness feel real. Each scene begins and ends with a fade out, sort of like chapters in a book. I can't think of another film that actually does that. Each scene is like its own short film. Fades in, fades out. And it's very effective. Also, Thel, William Blake's love interest who dies defending him, was a former prostitute. And she looks exactly like this dead fawn that William Blake later finds in the forest that was shot, presumably by this random shot made by Cole Wilson, the bounty hunter who was trying to catch him. You'll see. But you just notice that the dead fawn it's in the same position as Thel when she dies, and also William Blake. They've all been shot in the heart. And for some reason, I never put that together before. I never noticed that on a conscious level. These things are not always understood on a conscious level, but somewhere we realize their significance and their importance. Nobody is the comic relief and sets a strong contrast to the rest of the tone of the film. I think Gary Farmer, his performance is excellent. Even in the darkest moments of existence, there is still some humor. And maybe that's one of the greatest things about Jarmusch's films. He always has that. Nobody's protecting William Blake and leading him on this journey because he thinks he actually is the real poet that he fell in love with. He thinks he is the real William Blake. Guns and poetry. But again, the violence in Jim Jarmusch's film is realistic. It's gritty. It hurts to watch. It feels very real. I think my favorite scene of the film is with William Blake being led through the Native American village near the end of the film, and all the faces are superimposed, and it's sort of mimicking his state because he's dying, and everything seems to just be falling into the tree-lined sky, and it's just this cascading sea of images, and you have Neil Young's guitar, and as he's walking down this main street in the village looking at people on both sides, it's the same shot setup as in the beginning in The Town and Machine, and it's bookending the film, and he's gone through so much pain. He's been shot again by this point, and there's this moment where he grimaces and he raises his head just to keep going, and the guitar swells, and it's so subtle, but it really brings me close to tears. It's that's the metaphor for life, right? It's that's what you have to do when it gets that bad, and it's just so impressive. This impossible struggle that he makes nonetheless. It's such a subtle thing. I don't know. I hope you catch it, but it's great. The music is a character in the film, and it accentuates and even sort of gets involved with nobody in Blake's dialogue. There's this one scene where nobody's singing, and it's sort of off tune in comparison to the soundtrack, but then by the end of it, it goes in rhythm, it goes in line, and it syncs up, and it's just little things like that just make the, it makes everything blend, this synchronicity. I don't know, it's transcending some sort of limit of reality, and I think it's just a fucking perfect film. And Cole Wilson is one of the greatest antagonists of all time. And I'm not going to spoil all that for you. You can see why. But man, he is evil. He's Lance Henriksen. He's just so evil. And nobody tells Blake in the end, I must make sure that you pass back through the mirror at the place where the sea meets the sky. Like Rimbaud's Eternity, the sea matched with the sun. It's also one of the few films to represent Native American culture in this way, in a way that feels authentic and respectful. Better Than Food. Absolutely my favorite film. So who should watch it? If you enjoy Cormac McCarthy or There Will Be Blood by Paul Thomas Anderson, revisionist Western films, The Good, Bad, and the Ugly, you know, Sergio Leone stuff, spaghetti westerns, maybe El Topo by Jodorowsky. If you like The Gun Club or Nick Cave or any kind of Southern Gothic music or literature, and if you're a fan of dark, brooding art house cinema, then absolutely check it out. So, for this coffee lottery, I'm going to give away a 1-month subscription to either Filmstruck, where you can watch Dead Man. It's a streaming service online that have the Criterion and all these great art house films, or another film streaming service chosen by the winner, like Mubi or something that is available everywhere. I'm open to recommendations and I'm open to suggestions. So for those of you who are new, the coffee lottery is where I take all the names of the patrons on Patreon who have donated $5 or more per video to the show, and I place their names in this mason jar. I pull out a name for every review I do. The winner shall receive a 1-month subscription to a film streaming service of their choice, plus a bag of delicious coffee roasted by yours truly. If you would like to help support the show, you can head over to patreon.com/booksarbetterthanfood and donate $5 or more per video to get entered into the lottery. I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you to everyone who has supported the show, and good luck. All right, here we go. Johan. Thanks a bunch, Johan. Really appreciate it. Hope you enjoy Dead Man. And the delicious coffee. Please subscribe and hit the like button if you enjoyed this. You can also find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and you can get book reviews on the other channel here on YouTube. Yeah, thank you very much for watching. Hope you're all doing well. Talk to you soon. Take care and have a great night. Ciao.